So Acolyte actually isn't the most expensive Star Wars show. There's one that's now showing to be the most expensive, and it's still got a second season. We're going to talk about what that is, why that is, and everything in between. Welcome to the Force fandom. Let's hop right in. We're jumping into a Forbes article today that is outlining some pretty interesting thoughts when it comes to how much Disney is spending on these Star Wars shows. Here it is. The title of the article revealed the Star Wars streaming show with a higher budget than the films. Now, I'm going to just get right to it. I'm not going to read this whole article. They outline a whole bunch of different things in the beginning of this article, kind of going all the way back to Mandalorian and how we got Disney Plus to begin with, through Obi-Wan and Boba Fett and Ahsoka, Acolyte, all of it. But then we come to this right here. If you don't know, part of the reason Obi-Wan Kenobi was only having $80 million spent on it is because they changed their whole philosophy. If you remember back to when Obi-Wan was originally talked about, it was talked about as a movie. And we saw that in the recent interview that Star Wars Theory did with Stuart Beattie, the writer of that supposed trilogy. Well, things started to change. And Stuart Beattie even mentioned that that started to change when Solo failed. Because the Star Wars sequel trilogy bombed, Solo was partly a casualty of that. Now, I don't think Solo was as bad as its box office numbers suggested, but it also wasn't amazing. It was okay. But because of its failure, because of the money that it lost lost at least $90 million, maybe even more when you start to put into how much money they might have put in the marketing and all of that. They decided to take a shift and not take the risk. They thought, oh, people don't want to see these original trilogy characters, and we just did The Mandalorian, and Obi-Wan is kind of similar storyline to that, so we better not do another movie that flops. Let's make it a TV show. So what does this all have to do with the most expensive TV show? Well, they had booked time to film over in the UK. Here's what often happens. When studios film in the UK, they tend to set up subsidiaries there, which find detailed financial statements as part of the process, claiming a reimbursement of 25.5% of their costs. The UK government pays this as a reward to shows which film in the UK, and The Acolyte was one of them. Surprisingly, it was far from the most expensive Star Wars show that Disney made in the UK. That honor goes to, you guessed it, Andor. Now, how does Andor fit in to all of this? Because when Andor first came out, many folks, there were a lot of people that were frustrated that so much money was put into Andor and not put into Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan looked, or Kenobi, sorry, I don't even know the name of the show. Kenobi, so much money was put into this other show and Kenobi looked cheap. It looked like just bad. Well, part of the reason was the pandemic. The pandemic happened. They shifted their whole entire strategy away from a movie that was going to be filmed in the UK, and they instead brought it back to LA and started filming in LA. But here's the problem. They had booked time. They had booked time in the UK. And they couldn't just back out and say, well, someone else will schedule, someone else will take this soundstage and all of this. No. They still had it on the books, so they had to use something. They had to do something there, and they went and did Andor there. For those of you that didn't love Andor, that still might be on the fence, this is just going to frustrate you more, but Obi-Wan could have been done the way that Andor had been done. Now, I think there were still massive problems with that script and storytelling in the Kenobi show, but one of the big problems was the way it looked. That would have looked very different. And when you go to Andor, the one thing you cannot dispute is that show is just stunning. The camera, the cinematography, the shots, the practical sets, everything feels lived in because a lot of it was. It was not just on a soundstage, just in the volume, those types of things. So Andor took the place of Kenobi, and they backed out. They didn't want to make it a movie. They decided to put movie-like money into Andor, and the ratings weren't there, but the show was good. But people didn't watch it because Andor isn't as known a character. We see this even in current live action. When you start making shows based off of characters from animated shows, They're not as popular. They're not as known. Same with Andor. He was one of the main characters, Diego Luna, in Rogue One. So they decided to do kind of his backstory in a show, which I still think is a great idea, but it's not going to have the mass market appeal. Just like Ahsoka doesn't quite have the same mass market appeal. I know a bunch of folks who didn't watch that show because they didn't watch Rebels. They didn't watch Clone Wars, so they weren't quite sure who Ahsoka even was. Andor costed more than Acolyte, more than Rogue One. How much did Andor actually cost? Let's look at it. Andor is set 5 years before the tremendously successful original Star Wars trilogy and feels equally grounded thanks to its heavy use of practical effects and physical sets rather than digital backdrops, which are common in other Disney Star Wars productions, as we've reported. Yeah, and that's exactly the problem that we've seen. With an audience score of 87%, Andor has a higher rating on Rotten Tomatoes than any of Disney's other Star Wars streaming shows, which explains why a second season was given the green light, and it's due to debut next year. Andor's score is even higher than any of Disney's Star Wars movies, with the exception of 2016's spin-off film Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which starts to make you think maybe Tony Gilroy has something and is able to tell a story in such a way that fans really enjoy it. Now you have to bring that together with the mass marketability of characters like Kenobi or Luke Skywalker or others that would bring in that appeal. Maybe even Lando would be a better fit with Tony Gilroy. I don't know. Recent filings, look at this. Recent filings reveal that by the time filming for the second season of Andor began in 2022, so they've been selling. So before it began, Disney had spent a staggering $351.8 million on the show. That's more than Acolyte. That's more than all those others. As the chart below shows, this is 8% more than the cost of making Rogue One even, and a shade less than the $364 million spent at the box office bomb Solo. Okay, sorry, it wasn't more than Solo, but it was just about the same as Solo. Jeez. And you can see the tax credit, the net cost. Spending on Andor is shown in the filings for Disney's subsidiary E&E Industries, which produced the show. It was founded in October 2018 to work on, like I said, the Kenobi show, which was planned for the time to be a feature film shot in historic Pinewood Studios outside of London. And so this is exactly... So here's what happened. Because the sequel trilogy stunk, Solo ended up being a failure at the box office. And because Solo was a failure at the box office, Disney executives freaked out. They gave up on the movie of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they gave up on shooting at Pinewood Studios. They moved to LA, but they still had Pinewood Studios booked. And so they sent Andor there. Like, oh gosh. You just have to laugh. You just have to laugh. Now, this doesn't excuse how much they spent on Acolyte that doesn't look anything like it, right? Like, at least with Andor, you can look at it and go, the money went to something. The money made the show look good. I don't know where the money went for Acolyte. Who knows? Disney had to rethink the following failure of Solo, which lost more than $90 million. We already said that. And became Disney Plus streaming series. Again, they were trying to catch Netflix, but Netflix is crushing them in, and I mean, I'll be honest, fully transparent. I just today, literally right before filming this, canceled my Disney Plus subscription. I've been a Disney Plus subscriber since day one, in part due to Star Wars, but also I have young kids and I wanted to go through all the catalog of all the old Disney movies that I loved growing up with. We've done that. Now there's nothing to watch, and all the new stuff, not interested in. My kids aren't interested in. The only thing they're interested in is Bluey, and I'm just going to buy that. And then there we go. We got Bluey on DVD. But again, production was put on hold mid-January. We talked about all of that. The delay proved to be a blessing in disguise because they sent the world into a lockdown and the script was reworked. And you've heard about that on Star Wars Theory's channel. Filings show that when the shooting was underway, April 5th, 2021, a massive 3,782 people were working on Andor. Why? Because they were supposed to be working on a Kenobi movie, with women representing 35.9% of the crew. On average, they were only paid 0.7% less per hour than their male colleagues, making it one of Disney's most equitable productions. Hey, Acolyte fans, did you hear that? That Andor is the most equitable production. Why don't you go watch that? Why didn't you support that show? Why weren't you so excited about that show? It was an equitable. It was almost 1-for-1. There was no pay gap. Disney should have led with that in their marketing for Andor. And maybe then all of the Acolyte shills would have loved it as well. And it might have been, who am I kidding? That would have raised the ratings by just 80,000 people, right? Filming had ended by late September 2021. Late November, a total of $271 million had been spent on the show, including the 7.2 expenses on Kenobi. So the pre-production for Kenobi got lumped into there because that's what they started with at Pinewood Studios. Over the following year, a further $80 million was spent on Andor. The whole cost of Kenobi almost further on Andor. And it is believed that this was largely dedicated to post-production as the show premiered in September 2022. However, pre-production on a series also too accounted for some of the spending, and it began filming in November 2022, which is when the filings are dated. Okay, so some of the post-production could have been into the pre-production of season 2. So even say take half of that 80 and say some was for, it's still ridiculous. It's still $300 million. And I loved Andor and actually am excited for Andor too, but I find it so hilarious. That the ineptitude, the failure of Disney executives to actually understand anything regarding the fandom caused them to fumble this bag so hard. If they had just decided to stick with production of Kenobi, to pause everything and still make it a movie, put that investment into Kenobi with a good script and all of that practical set at Pinewood Studios, I think that's a hit. Or at the very least, in the box office, you're going to make money. Even if people don't like it, you're still going to make money. The reason people didn't go see the prequel Solo was because it was a new face. But if you had Ewan, oh, come on, and Hayden, it's just hilarious, guys. Well, there's a little bit more of this article I think you'll find even funnier. Here it is. Excluding the $7.2 million of Obi-Wan Kenobi expenses, put the spending of Andor Season 1, pre-production of Season 2 at around $344 million. Doesn't stop there. It also received a $70 million reimbursement in return for filming in the UK. This brings Andor costs down to $273 because they got that money back, which is still more than the $269 million net spending on Rogue One, not far off from the $298 of Solo, and still puts it above and more expensive than what's been reported of Acolyte, but we don't have these final numbers. So there's a real chance that Acolyte was like 300, more, like 350 at the end of the day, because they wouldn't have gotten all of this reimbursement back, right? Oh man, I can't wait. Can't wait to see those numbers and just laugh. It is considerably better value for the money than either of them, given its length. So Andor was better value for the money. The 12 episodes of Andor total 547 minutes long. Yeah, because you're not making these dinky, short, dumb episodes. Compared to the hour 133 for Rogue One and 135 for Solo, it gives Andor a cost of $500K per minute, compared to $2 million for Rogue One and Solo. Crucially, the filings reveal that the cost of Andor was within its budget. Because the budget was meant for Kenobi. Wow. It too was made in the UK, and although filings showing the cost of filming have not yet been released, the breakdown of the staff have come to light when filming was in full swing April 5th, 2023 at just 1,000. So a third of the staff employees, less than a third of the number who worked on the season 1 just 2 years earlier. If it has lower costs than its predecessor, but is just as well received, it really will be a force to be reckoned with. That support of Andor Season 2 should be something you should consider. I know I'm going to. I know I said I canceled Disney Plus. I'll probably restart it just for Andor Season 2 because I want them to invest money in good projects. I will give Disney money when they are doing the right thing. I want to positively reinforce the good and ignore the bad. I'm going to say that again. I know there's many out there that you're like, don't give any money to Disney. But here's the point. If we positively reinforce the good and we ignore the bad, we start training Disney finally maybe to start getting it. But honestly, they won't, because they botched this and fumbled the bag so hard around Kenobi and Andor and Acolyte. All you can kind of do is just laugh and see them burn their money away. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'll catch you on the next one.